everyone, this is Eden Mabon of LightCycleAstrology.com, and today we're taking a look at the astrology of December 2023, doing an astrological overview of the month ahead. I really like the astrology for December. It has that classic holiday magic feeling to it. We'll get into that here in a moment. Before we do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. Leave some comments in the comment section, and if you would like to get a reading from yours truly, you can go to LightCycleAstrology.com and check out the readings that I offer there. Okay, well, let's pull up the real-time clock and get right into it. We have a lot of aspects to cover in the month here. Now, I'm beginning the video and publishing this on Monday, December the 4th, so we're already a few days in, and one thing that happens this Monday is Venus enters the sign of Scorpio, moving out of the sign of Libra. So ancient astrologers said that this was a place where Venus was said to be in a sign of her detriment, right? And that is, of course, when a planet moves into a sign that is opposite to one of the signs that it rules. So, of course, Venus rules Taurus and Libra. She's moved out of Libra, so she's lost a little bit of dignity there, and she moves into a sign opposite to another one of her temples of Taurus. So this is really interesting because even though this is technically a sign of Venus's detriment, and there are some qualities to that where Venus is a little bit banged up, one thing that is really fascinating about Venus in a Mars-ruled sign in particular is the fact that it really brings out the quality of sexual tension or tension between the sexes that is attractive, right? We all know or have experienced relationships that don't have that sexual chemistry or tension to it. If people are too nice or boring or just somehow kind of blah, oftentimes we're not interested. So, and that happens on the side of both men and women, right? So Venus in a Mars-ruled sign like Scorpio, there is a lot of the fascination between the sexes or with the opposite sex. And so that's one thing that is kind of a positive. But you could see themes around Venus being very attracted to deep, mysterious, dark, dangerous, brave, edgy, gritty, ugly, bad, bloody, horrific types of things, all Mars kinds of things. And remember that this isn't Mars's happy, springtime, light, invigorated sign of Aries. This is Mars's underworldly, dark, the leaves are falling off the tree at this time of the year, and we're entering a season that has a connection with death. So Scorpio being connected to the underworld and death, this is a much darker Mars mode for Venus to be traveling through. Now, one thing that I have noticed as a native of Venus in Scorpio in my birth chart is that, like for instance, I remember that I think it was Linda Goodman in Sun Signs, a book I read when I was first getting into astrology all low these many years ago. And I think I remember her saying something like, Scorpios have this incredible willpower that they can override the regular trappings of mortal life that the rest of the people don't have the ability to do. It's like they're like super heroic or something, you know? I don't find that to be true, and I think it's because I have Venus in the sign of Scorpio, so I'm not just a Sun Scorpio. I'm a Venus in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio. I have a lot of planets in Scorpio, and one of the ways in which that ancient Hellenistic language of dignities comes alive for me is that Venus in the sign of her detriment. Venus can really like things that are detrimental to one's personal health or to one's just health in general. What is good for you and the vices that you have can be really challenging to resist. And I know vices are challenging for everybody to resist, but this is Venus, you know, it's like telling Venus no, and Venus doesn't like to be told no very much, right? We want what we want, and that is challenging to not want what we want if it's something bad. So it's just like you have to tell Venus no a lot of the times, and that's kind of, again, it's like antithetical to her nature. So that is one of the qualities that you get with Venus in the sign of Scorpio. And she also has a propensity to bring quarrels to relationships. Now, one of the reasons for this is because Scorpio is a sign that tries to get the deep down, the hidden or really deep-seated things that might be festering in the darkness, either within or without. It tries to get and investigate those things. It tries to purge them out and get rid of them so that they cannot create problems down the road. So on the surface, it looks like Venus is just being quarrelsome in relationships. But what she feels intuitively is that this may be a time where, for the health of the overall relationship dynamic between, it could be between friends, sisters, somebody you're in a romantic relationship with, there is a propensity to sort of engage in quarrelsome things for the benefit of perhaps digging out things that might be festering in the darkness. That's one thing that you can see with Venus in Scorpio. But of course, she is easily aroused in the feelings of jealousy, possessiveness, or suspiciousness, and could also be a Venus that is capable of sacrificing what is loved or sacrificing something for love. So the ancient symbol for Mars out of Egypt on the Egyptian temple walls was that of a knife. So Venus in a Mars-ruled sign, Venus can always cut things or kill things that it loves, put it on the altar of sacrifice, and say something like, this thing I love, I used to love it, I don't love it anymore. So in that sense, there can be just a way of walking away or separating yourself from something that you used to love. But Venus in Scorpio can also sacrifice part of itself for people that she loves, because Mars is the warrior that stands guard against the invading armies and is willing to die in battle if necessary to protect, the home and hearth and family and loved ones and so forth. So you get that kind of like, well, I'd really like to be home and hang out with you guys, but I need to take the extra overtime at work for, so we can have a great Christmas or something like that. Venus in Scorpio also likes to be feels the need to be very protective of people that she loves or things that she loves. I remember this I think it was junior high. I remember that for whatever reason at that time, I became acutely aware of bullying that was happening with other students around me. And these were kids that I didn't know. I didn't have any, association with whatsoever. But I remember feeling the sense that I should be the one that really should stick up and try to stop or mitigate the bullying that was happening around me. And I've always felt like that. I've always really felt like I have this need to protect, people that are somehow being mistreated or abused or anything like that. It really is hard on me. And I think that also goes back to me having Venus in Scorpio in my birth chart. That's part of a thing that Venus does in Scorpio, I think. Venus in Scorpio loves integrity, loyalty, protecting, purity, purgative, cathartic, emotional discharge. But she also loves competition, war, and how death is a part of life. That is something that Venus is fascinated, the element of death within the realm of life. So she can be fascinated by those things as well. Now, if we roll the real-time clock forward to the next day on Tuesday, December the 5th here, we get Venus perfecting a trine to Saturn. So this is a trine between Venus and Saturn in the water elements. Now, this will intensify some of those Venus and Scorpio qualities, like, for instance, the loyalty. Of course, Venus in a trine with Saturn, I would expect maybe people to be moving to the next level of commitment in relationships, for instance, maybe people proposing to each other right now or something like that. So you can see a deepening of commitment with relationships, or a deepening of responsibility or duties that you take on within relationships. And this can be emotional, right? Because this is happening between two water signs. Now, the other thing that can be intensified, the other natural quality of Venus in the sign of Scorpio that can sort of be intensified by Saturn. If you think about Saturn, Saturn is a god that is a god of people that are somehow, well, Saturn is a malefic, so Saturn can be like Saturn, the homeless person on the street could embody Saturn, somebody outside of society, somebody despondent or depressed or something like that. So there is this way in which when you get a trine with Venus and Scorpio to Saturn and Pisces, are you somehow capable of loving people or situations that are despondent, depressed, wayward, somehow outside of normal, almost like things that are like taboo? You get the sense it's kind of like Courtney Love falling in love with Kurt Cobain, this tortured, beautiful musician artist that is, he's beautiful and he's talented, but he's got some real problems, right? He's addicted to drugs, and he's this tortured artist kind of figure. But Courtney falls in love with him regardless, and it didn't work out great for her in the end because these problems couldn't resolve themselves, unfortunately, for Kurt and Courtney and their baby, Frances Bean, I think her name was. But anyway, it's like it has that quality. Could you fall in love with something despondent, depressed, wayward, somehow outside of what is normally liked? Yes. But another thing is that if with Saturn in Pisces, Pisces, a Jupiter-ruled sign, Saturn in Pisces can be about rejecting beliefs or believing in something that is kind of pessimistic. So if you if you get Venus in Scorpio, let's say she gets suspicious that she's being cheated on, the angel on the right side of the shoulder is going to say, well, okay, it feels bad, but don't snoop through all of your partner's things. Like, that's wrong. But this is a Venus that says, yeah, well, I don't care because I really strongly believe in this thing. So you could get things like that. You could get defending a vice, defending something that is not so great, but you're going to do it anyway. Or it could be something like, for example, I'm going to keep seeing the person that I'm having an affair with because I'm sure there is no hope in my marriage. And I think that when I was a teenager, I ran into something like this. The last time that Saturn was in the sign of Pisces was in my mid-teenager years, and I remember having this sort of overall feeling like the future was just whatever, like it wasn't going to be great. It just has that pessimistic outlook, and you sort of believe that about the future, right? So when my girlfriend, when her father moved her 3 towns north, I eventually, we had this long distance thing for a while, but eventually I ran away from home. I ignored my future, what was good for me about my future, finishing school. I dropped out, of course, what my parents wanted. I wasn't concerned with what was great for me. I was just really concerned about remaining connected to the person that I loved. So this has a little bit of that quality to it. Okay, now if we roll the real-time clock forward to December the 8th, a few days later, this is Friday, the end of this week here, we are going to get a trine forming between Mercury and Jupiter. Now, this is going to be the first trine that these two planets engage with over the course of many weeks to come, because Mercury is about to station and turn retrograde this month. So this is just the first out of 3 aspects that is happening with this trine. And one thing that is really interesting is that when Mercury stations and turns retrograde, Mercury is still within the 3-degree range of engagement to Jupiter. So Mercury moves into this aspect with Jupiter and then it slows down and never moves past the aspect and is within the aspect or within the range of engagement, while Mercury stops and reverses direction to turn retrograde. So this time that we get this perfected trine between Mercury and Jupiter is actually, the aspect is holding until for about 2 weeks, until December 21st. So this is a real big background energy of the month here. Mercury perfects a second trine to Jupiter on December the 18th during retrograde. Mercury goes through the cazimi at 4:01 p.m. to 9:35 p.m. and that is GMT time on December the 22nd. And then Mercury perfects the third and final trine of the sequence on January 19. So this trine represents what I think the Mercury retrograde this time is going to be all about. So this is an aspect that we want to pay special attention to this month, because it is what I think the Mercury retrograde is really getting at the heart, and it's around for a while in the background. What I think Mercury in Capricorn trine to Jupiter in Taurus is going to be about, if we take into account the signs that they're in and what have you, I think that this is a process of how maturity can relate or relates to positive growth towards goals, right? We have Jupiter in Taurus. Taurus is a sign that Jupiter is going to try to grow steadily and bring good fortune to the young springtime energies of our lives that are there to bring things into manifestation, right? It's an earth kind of sign. Jupiter will grow things in the soil, so to speak. It's rather like your personal garden almost, if you will. And with Mercury in that really serious tactical sign of Capricorn, right? Mercury is really going to be going through a process of how can maturity, or how does maturity relate to how I achieve what it is that I want? So you could see themes around mental fortitude, determination, persistence, endurance that leads to greater success. Mentally, Mercury is bent on success almost at all costs. So Mercury can be shrewd, or, be very clever, and it just is really bent on what begets success. Duties or responsibilities also can weigh heavily on the mind during this time, but again, this is about how do we provide things for positive growth in our lives. And of course, there can be that quality of Mercury being in Capricorn, making a positive aspect to a benefic planet that is like discipline that you're able to really bring into your focus right now, that can be used to learn or develop skills, especially communicative skills or writing skills or anything like that. So it's a great time to learn. As this aspect comes through, for sure. You can be learning things that are really beneficial to your life down the road. Communicating with wise or learned people is also maybe a more of a Hellenistic delineation, such as having conversations with people like professors, mentors, doctors, lawyers, priests, those Jupiterian kind of figures, monks, etc. Some of the lessons that could be about this whole sequence of aspects with Mercury trine Jupiter, not just this time around, but the second one retrograde and the third and final one, could be that we are learning when to hold back and when it's appropriate to voice what you think. And I think that that could be a part of this because, Mercury is slowed down a bit in Saturn's sign of Capricorn. Mercury can often hold back speaking. It can keep things to itself a lot in this sign. So there could be lessons as Mercury turns and things shift about, okay, I should have said this thing, but I didn't. I held it back. Or it could also be, I said this thing and it was really harsh and that didn't go over well as well. So there can be lessons around how do I deliver what I want to say? When should I say something? When should I hold back? What's too harsh? Things like that. Sometimes you need to understand the bigger picture too. Mercury retrogrades back into Sagittarius during the retrograde coming up here. So there's like, Mercury moving back into a sign is representative, I think, of Mercury needing to rethink something in a different mode. And the mode is Jupiterian-like. And so there can be this, Sagittarian Mercury is concerned with the philosophy or like the bigger picture or the deeper meaning or something like that. So it's as if we almost have to, like, we get really serious and really focused and we're really bent on what can I learn? What can I do? What can I say that improves my life? But somehow something happens and it's as if before we can totally answer that question, we have to gain some kind of higher perspective or some deeper knowledge or wisdom or something like that. And I think that you get that picture because Mercury moves back into Sagittarius during the retrograde. So I think that that's a really interesting part of this Mercury retrograde that's coming up. Now, of course, Mercury in Capricorn trine to Jupiter can also be about how are we more conservative perhaps with our money, or saving better or spending less or something like that. And it's other lessons could be something like when is hard-mindedness, Mercury in a Saturn ruled sign, when does that promote growth, and when can that be too rigid, dogmatic, things like that. We can really sell ourselves short at times if we're too rigid or dogmatic in our belief system. So those could all be some of the lessons I think you might see with this aspect. Okay, now if we roll the real-time clock forward to December the 10th, a few days later, we are going to get Venus moving into an opposition with Jupiter. And this is a really, really interesting aspect because on the one hand, you have both of the benefics coming together in any aspect is usually a signification of something positive, something that's about to manifest that is of benefit, right? The benefics coming together, and their testimony is that, hey, good things are happening. So you could expect to just see general good fortune that might come around at this time. But this also has the potential to manifest things that are not just good, but also maybe like especially big or exciting or powerful. Or with Venus in Scorpio, it could be things that are kind of thrilling. It could be exciting things that are risky or thrilling and that happen in a big way. Venus opposed Jupiter. So that's kind of interesting. Now, the other thing that might come up, though, is that we are talking about an opposition between the two planets. So Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. Jupiter likes to make things big in a pleasant and orderly kind of way, right? Taurus likes that steadiness of order. Jupiter provides that kind of cohesion or order around the light that is slowly climbing towards the summer solstice. So there's this real positive trotting steadily towards your goals, growing things in a steady and orderly way. It's kind of everything is organized because that brings beneficial things, right? A clean house, a nice garden, law and justice in the community, things like that. That's kind of Jupiter and Taurus. So that's coming up against or in opposition to Venus and Scorpio, which likes to flirt with things that are more destructive and dangerous. So that's an interesting thing. It's almost like Jupiter and Taurus wants to promote this orderly sense of cohesion that is life promoting, and Venus in Scorpio wants to promote or is attracted to things that might be about things falling apart or is flirting with dangers or things connected to death. So it's almost like life versus death in a certain way. And that's an odd mixture with the benefics. One theme that might come up is sacrificing the sacred cow. It's kind of like anything that you've held sacred, anything that seems to have provided that regular, prudent sense of morality or sense of like, this is right and wrong. Sometimes with Venus and Scorpio, you can say, yeah, well, I don't give a damn, I'm like, this is what I want. And I have held this belief far too long. And this sacred cow, this morality, this justice, whatever it is, just throw it away. Just, flush it down the drain. It doesn't need to be there anymore. There can be like that real rebellious quality with this. So something like a sacrifice of a sacred cow of belief, morality, order, or something like that. And of course, Venus also loves what is taboo, and that flies in the face of religion, cohesion, morality, ethical or virtuous things. Those are kind of a ways in which you could see maybe a shadow side of this aspect. But in general, I think that this has the potential to represent manifestations of good things, especially those that are big, exciting, powerful, maybe thrilling, or moments or outcomes that are positive for us. Okay, now if we roll the real-time clock forward to December the 12th, we are going to get into our second week of the month here. And now we get the new moon happening in the sign of Sagittarius. So we get the first lunation of the month. The moon becomes new in a double-bodied sign. Today we call that a mutable sign, right? But the ancients had this language that they called it this double-bodied sign, and you can see that even in the glyph of Sagittarius itself, right? Where actually in all double-bodied signs you kind of get a little bit of the duality there, but they call it this because it's a mixing of two seasons in one month here. You get the fall time mixing with the winter time in Sagittarius, and that's because it's coming at the end of the fall. But in the glyph, you get the half, you get the centaur, right? The half man and the body of the horse. One of the mantic divinatory things that you get with planets in a double-bodied sign often is that things come in pairs. So when you get a new moon in a double-bodied sign, sometimes you get two things that are new. It's almost like twins are being born or something like that. So look for not just one thing to be represented by the new moon here, but perhaps two things. Now, one of those could be connected to, or could be a seed of that which is more primal and wild, that which connects to our instinct and has this quality of like the hunter and is very open and untamed. That is more the horse, the wild horse kind of body within Sagittarius. Now, the other could be about redemption or bringing things back into order and things that are heading more towards that Capricorn responsibility or duty. But Sagittarius struggles with that a little bit. So you could see kind of that arc of like something being untamed and wild, and then something else needing to redeem or save something that has been untamed or wild. The other might be connected to how we save our soul, for instance, in a certain way. So that's pretty interesting. Now, because this is the second week of the month, when we get to this during the Mantic Monday episodes in December, we'll take a little bit deeper look at this. But being that this is just an overview, we're just kind of skimming the surface here a little bit today so we can get to all of the aspects. But that happens on December the 12th, the new Sagittarius moon. Now, if we go to December the 17th, we're going to get a sun square Neptune now. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I almost left out the Mercury retrograde on the 13th. So on December the 13th, Mercury stations at about 8.5 degrees of Capricorn to turn retrograde. So again, that is still within that 3-degree range to Jupiter over here in Taurus at 6 degrees, right? They're still within 3 degrees of a trine aspect to one another. So that is an aspect that is holding that we already talked about. And then if we go forward to the 17th, then we get the sun squaring Neptune. And remember at the beginning of the video that I said that this month for me really has that magic of the holidays. You know, they always say that Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year. And you can tell by the way that I'm dressed, I'm no stranger to celebrating the season. But they also say that there is this mysterious magic that comes at Christmas time. And I think that we see that with a few different aspects this December, namely to Neptune and the cazimi that happens later with Mercury. But on the 17th, this square from the sun to Neptune starts to bring in that holiday magic. It has great hope, optimism, openness, fantastic alluring, that lights up your soul with the stirring of imagination and the unity of all mankind. And of course, that is because we are seeing the sun in Sagittarius, a Jupiter-ruled sign, making a square to Neptune in another Jupiter-ruled sign in Pisces. So this is a lot of Jupiter, and these are planets that one brings kind of this divine illumination, and the other brings this really mystical, magical quality to it. So even though that this is a square, you can go overboard with this. This can really be, that you can form beliefs with this square on the shadow side that aren't so great, or you take it too far, or they're somehow diluted. You can believe that you are something you're not, that is too grandiose or big. You can believe that you need to do something with your life or steer your life in a purposeful direction that maybe isn't going to work out, and it's rather going to land on the rocks instead and be quite destructive down the road. But I think that with the sun being in late degrees of Sagittarius, it's likely that we're more in the head side of the Sagittarius glyph. We're not in the wild, instinctive animal of the horse. We're more leaning towards the rational mind of the top part of the centaur, the human head and is it neck or shoulders? I forget. Yeah, it's the arms, right? So it's the upper torso. We're kind of in that rational mind. Perhaps we're leaning more towards the arc of redemption, but like, for instance, could you believe that you need to save somebody that's like my father? He was a pretty bad alcoholic. And I always remember my mother saying that one of the reasons that she married my father was because because of the family karma with her father, she always felt as though she needed to save my dad. He needed rescuing. So this is an aspect where you can really try to rescue something in a big way, whether that's yourself or another person or what have you. But it also adds in, of course, a lot of the magic. It's that kind of like make a wish on a Christmas star kind of aspect. And we see more of this as the month goes on, but this is part of that. Now, if we roll the real-time clock forward to Tuesday, December the 21st, we get Venus moving into an opposition with Uranus. Venus in Scorpio, again, attracted to things that are maybe exciting or dangerous. And then you get this connection with Uranus. So we could very much become excited about things that are somehow unconventional and dark at the same time. An example of this is, when you drive by the scene of a car accident, there's always that fascination with it, right? We have Venus in Scorpio being attracted to things that are related to death. And it's something that you don't get to see that much, although sometimes that really surprising, shocking quality of Uranus. So it's like driving by a car accident and slowing down so that you can see the spectacle of life and death that is hanging in the balance, that is somehow unusual or out of the blue, something that is near you that you don't normally get to have around you. It's like that car accident. You don't see it all the time, but when you do, there's that morbid fascination that is kind of somehow exciting, and you want to see, what is this life and death thing all about? Because we, of course, all have to face death at some point, and normally we go through life kind of not thinking about it until we get a bit older, right? And the older we get, the more that we can think about death. But day to day, usually your average person is really not going to be thinking about death all that much. But this could be different. So, for instance, it doesn't have to be a literal death with this aspect. It could be that there is a metaphorical death of something, a metaphorical death of, like, I'm leaving my job, or I'm leaving my partner, or I'm whatever it is. I'm leaving something behind, and there's this quality of danger and excitement with doing it. So in other words, it might not be so completely rational. And now with Mercury beginning to go retrograde in the sign of Capricorn, heading back towards Sagittarius, that's an interesting quality. It's right in the middle of the month here. It's like there's something exciting. There's maybe something connected with a metaphorical death, or things changing over somehow. And there's this larger than life quality with planets in Sagittarius. There's this seriousness with Mercury going retrograde, and now there's this kind of this opposition that tends to bring about sudden acts of independence or freedom with Uranus here. So you really kind of get the sense that this is a pretty wild hump right in the middle of the month here. But in just like normal ways, it could be things like you're going skiing in the mountains or whatever, and you decide you're going to take the most dangerous, risky, crazy ski run that the mountain holds. And all of a sudden you go down this thing like a daredevil, and you realize, I have no business being on this run. This is way too dangerous. But in the moment you just get swept up by it, or something like that. Okay. Now, if we roll the real-time clock forward to December the 22nd, and this is going to be at a precise time, we get the winter solstice coming through at 3:27 a.m. GMT time. So let me just move the hours along to get that exact time here. I just have to move it one more minute here. Maybe it's 3:28 a.m. We get the sun crossing the winter solstice degree marker. This is one of the, of course, the 4 quarters of the year where the sun crosses over very important degrees in the zodiac. And this is the winter solstice degree that begins the sign of Capricorn and was said to be the gateway of the gods, right? This is a Saturn ruled sign. This is the beginning of the winter season. So a very, very magical and mystical moment for the sun crossing into Capricorn's mystical Saturn sign of Capricorn here. So I really like this. Now, one thing that is just incredible about this winter solstice for me is that look at Mercury. Mercury retrograde at 1 degree and 32 minutes of Capricorn as the sun enters. They're about to go into cazimi, folks. So that is really exciting to get the sun crossing over one of the most important thresholds of the year. You know, you get the symbolism of the birth of Christ at this time. Think about that, right? And whether you are a Christian or you're not a Christian, that ancient symbolism is profound, right? It is about, like for instance, they have in ancient England, they have the battle between the Holly King and the Oak King, and the Oak King is being reborn at this time, and represents the takeover of light that is beginning to defeat the darkness at this time, because this is the moment, of course, when the sun has reached its lowest declination to the earth, which is why we get the longest and coldest, darkest night of the year. But from this point forward, the sun begins to rise. And of course, solstice means the sun stands still. If you've ever seen that documentary, the old documentary called Zeitgeist, which was controversial, and people say, well, it's maybe not so accurate or whatever, but be that as it may, it was a great documentary, in my opinion, because at least the beginning of it, because it talked about the symbolism of this moment. It talked about how the sun comes to this point, and it looks like, especially to ancient people who didn't have our technology, it looked as though, the sun leading up to the winter solstice was heading more and more to the left or south, right? And it was coming lower and lower in the sky each day. The arc of the sun was lower and lower. It was getting darker and darker and colder. And at this, we only have 2 of these points. We have the winter solstice and the summer solstice that the sun does these really weird things. But at the winter solstice, the ancients at first weren't so confident that the sun might not keep going south and keep getting lower. Like, it wasn't guaranteed, maybe. So one of the reasons why we began celebrating festivals at this time of the year in the ancient past was because the sun would slow down that progression towards the south and down and down and down, because of course we need the sun to live, right? So we don't want the bugger to go away. And when they saw the sun stop, and then it would stand still for 3 days. And one of the things that's really fascinating about what they talked about in Zeitgeist, for me at least, was that in this part of the sky in the south, you have the Southern Cross that you can see, depending on where you are. If you're too far north, you don't see this. But here in Hawaii, I can see the Summer Cross. I think it's like a few weeks of the year. So you have to be pretty far south to see this. But in the Bible, it says that the sun, God's son, dies on the cross, is crucified on the cross, and then is resurrected after 3 days. So there is solar messianic symbolism here that is saying, in other words, from the standpoint of astronomy, the sun dies and stands still, comes to its lowest point in the year, and stands still for 3 days near where the Southern Cross is in the sky, and then is resurrected because he begins moving north and up from that point forward. So there's deep symbolic meaning here with the birth of Christ and the battle between the Holly King and the Oak King. Deep mythological symbolism here that has been in many spiritual traditions, not just the Christian one. So I really find this moment a very spiritual and special moment, of course, but to have that moment happen as we get a Mercury cazimi, where Mercury moves onto the heart of the sun, is just like, wow. Because Mercury cazimis, And let me just roll the real-time clock forward to this cazimi moment. It's about 24 hours later, we get the cazimi with Mercury here. So this is by 4:28 on December the 23rd. So to have that moment where the sun is crossing that really important solstice moment, that has this symbolism of the light of God being reborn after the 3 days of death. That's just like, wow, because Mercury cazimi moments are often about whatever the Mercury retrograde is about, whatever the themes that are going on that Mercury retrograde is representing for us. The cazimi moment where Mercury is in the heart of the sun is sort of like the alchemical, like coming to knowledge of what we should do or what it is that the retrograde has been about. It's sort of like where we begin to understand what the plan is, or what we've learned, or what the lessons are of the retrograde, or what it is that has been an issue or a problem. You begin to find out how can you solve it. There are all kinds of significations for a Mercury cazimi, but all of them have to do with being empowered by the sun, and the sun brings knowledge, wisdom, understanding, light. It illuminates the mind. So you get this very mental clarity or illumination that is happening as Mercury goes into the heart of the sun, and this is happening right as the sun is reborn. So I just I could honestly almost cry that this is so beautiful. I love this. So that is happening on December the 23rd. I would say that, like, for instance, this moment is so special and sacred and spiritual that if you have the way of getting to a quiet, beautiful place, maybe in nature or something like that, this would be a great time to have, like a spiritual moment for yourself that reflects that symbolism of new beginnings, right? It's a wonderful new beginning that can really draw down some important information, a moment of clarity that you could have. So this is like a time, like, for instance, where, like, I might plan to hike to the top of a mountain, and look at the stars at night or something like that, and just really be in that moment because it's a beautiful moment. So okay, enough of my rambling here. Let's go on to, also on the 23rd, right after the cazimi, we are getting now Mercury retrograding back into the sign of Sagittarius just after the cazimi. So there you can see. And now Mercury is on his way to making a conjunction by retrograde back to Mars in Sagittarius. So we're going to see that here in a while, but that is happening on December the 23rd. If we go to Christmas Day on Monday this year, December the 25th, we get a Venus trine Neptune. So first we had the Sun square Neptune. So Neptune was being engaged that way. And now we have a Venus trine Neptune. So this is really where you get that holiday magic that is coming in. Venus trine Neptunes are all about the love and unity of all mankind, and which for me is like the moral of the Christmas mythology, right? It's all about peace on earth, love for all mankind. It's that time where you say hi to strangers, you bring cheer, and you're warm and open and friendly with people that you wouldn't normally even say hi to. Those are the morals of the season, right? And it brings that holiday magic. So this is going to be a very magical Christmas, in my opinion. But we have some interesting ways in which this is magical. This isn't, I have in my notes here, this is definitely pure Christmas magic, but this is not the Hallmark, you're in a snowy log cabin with your long lost boyfriend kind of, Hallmark Channel variety kind of magic. This is something that is akin a little bit more to Krampus Fest. If you guys don't know, Krampus was a Christmas holiday tradition that is in southern Germany and I think Austria, and Switzerland. And Krampus was a Christmas devil. I'm sure you guys know because they have this movie called Krampus, but this culture in this region had that there was not just a saint that was a gift giver at this time, but also that there was kind of this horned goat-like devil figure. And if you were naughty, this devil figure would put you in a bag and take you down a well to the underworld where there was I think it was Thrala, the Holly Witch or something like this. But anyway, you'll have to look this up if this is fascinating. But now they have these Krampus festivals where people wear these masks and their horns and they're devils. So the reason why I say that this is not so much the Hallmark Channel variety Christmas magic and more like the Krampus Fest is because we're talking about Venus being in the sign of Scorpio. So there's that darker, grim brother kind of, Marsy, scorpionic, darker, devilish kind of Venus that is making a trine to Neptune, bringing in that more devilish, underworldly kind of magical feeling that you get out of like maybe some of the more scarier elements of things like a Grimm Brothers fairy tale or something like that. So this is more like a Krampus Fest during Christmas, which can be very, very fun and exciting, right? It's going to bring a lot of excitement, but it does have that interesting quality of Venus being in Scorpio and bringing in the more devilish darkness side of things. Like, for instance, I always remember, I'm going to forget the title of the song, but one of the Christmas songs, the classic Christmas songs that says that long, long ago, one of the things that we used to do is tell scary stories. It's the most wonderful time of the year. That's the song, right? And he says, there'll be scary ghost stories. So it was in older Christmas tradition that it wasn't just Halloween that we would be connected with things that are scary and beyond the grave. It was also at this time of the year too, during Christmas. And of course we have, things like Charles Dickens writing about Ebenezer Scrooge and the ghost story, so famous for Christmas. But again, so this is very much Christmas, pure Christmas magic, but it has that darker element to it. And that is Christmas Day. So I'm really looking forward to Christmas this year. Now, if we roll the real-time clock forward to Wednesday, December the 27th, we're almost to the end of the month here, and we are going to get Mercury conjoining Mars on a full moon in Cancer at the same time. So, wow, that is a pretty powerful full moon here. Full moon is happening right around, it's very early on December the 27th GMT time. It's just after midnight. And Mercury still has a little ways to go to perfect the conjunction to Mars, but definitely that is going to be baked into the full moon, you might think. So this is going to be the last full moon of the year. This full moon also features a Mercury square Neptune. So that is also pretty interesting. We get a lot of Neptune things this month. But this culminates around the meaning of home and family and our spiritual center, of course, because this is a full moon in the sign of Cancer, the sign of the home and the family and things like that. So this is the moon in her natural temple culminating something. So this is about the culmination of things that are at the root of our foundation. Like if it's not literally the home and the family, it could just be at the center of what supports us, the center of what our lives are supposed to be about in theory. And we might expect things like maybe a little bit of that hangover feeling that you get after the holidays. For me, I always get quite sad for some reason. It's almost like the high of the holidays, and then you sort of come down and it's like, okay, back, the magic is over. It's back to ordinary life, and everybody goes home, and you hug everybody goodbye and things like that. So this could be with that Mercury conjoining Mars, there could be a little bit of that edginess and feeling kind of like the hangover. Mercury square Neptune, kind of like, oh, I had too much eggnog, I ate too much sweets or something like that. Everybody's going home and it's just kind of like not feeling so great, maybe like the tummy ache, not wanting the good times to come to an end. having to board a plane and go back home and go back to work. It has that I don't want to go back to reality kind of a feeling to it. And there could also be that there may be arguments of important matters that are concerning the home or family that come into focus, of course, with Mercury conjoining a malefic planet like Mars. We'll talk about this more in depth as we get into this fourth week here on the channel, but that is happening on the 27th. And then the last thing that I have is Venus entering the sign of Sagittarius on December the 30th. So we have the second to last day of the year here, and now Venus moves out of the sign of Scorpio into a new sign, picking up a little bit of dignity or getting out of a little bit of maybe some unhealthy dignity. Venus in Sagittarius is very bright, of course. It's very hopeful, optimistic. It can really indulge exuberantly. So one of the reasons why that full moon might be a little bit of kind of like, I really don't want to go back to reality. I really wish that the camaraderie of the season or the good, warm, cozy feelings of the fire and Christmas and the holidays and all of that stuff. One of the reasons why I think that this is going to be a little bit of a harder thing to let go of is because of Venus moving into Sagittarius right away. And, you know, Venus in Sagittarius is like, I want the party to keep going. You know, it's the after party for the party kind of a thing, right? And so the heart becomes lighter and more open to the journey ahead. That's one quality of Venus in Sagittarius. The holidays are over, but it's not the festive motto of the holidays of like eat, drink, and be merry. That is definitely not over when Venus moves into this sign. And this is also a season of philosophy. And this is really kind of a cool thing, but philosophy, the etymology of this word, of course, is something like the brotherly love of wisdom. So when you have the goddess of love moving into a Jupiter sign, it's like that word philosophy can be a key word. It's like you really might become attracted to all manner of things that are about higher meaning or the love for wisdom or philosophy or something like that, astrology, you know, anything like that can be just real attractive at this time. So I love that the word philosophy means the love of wisdom, and then we have Venus moving into a Jupiter ruled sign that means the same kind of thing. So I think philosophy is kind of a good key word for Venus in the sign of Sagittarius. Okay, now there is actually, I lied, there's one last thing of the month here on December the 31st. This isn't so obvious by looking at the chart here, but the last day of the year and of the month, I don't even have this as a title. We get Mars, look at this, we get the sun at about 9 degrees of Capricorn and Mars at about 4 degrees. So that's around 15 degrees of separation between Mars and the sun. And I'm going to plug back in the ascendant, rather. This is what we need, the ascendant. There we go. Okay, so what's happening is that we get Mars rising before the sun. You see that here is the sun at 10 degrees, and then we've got the ascendant, right? The place where the sun rises in the east every morning. And you'll see that Mars is above the ascendant. So get an emergence of Mars back into visibility because we have about 15 degrees of separation between Mars and the sun. Now, this might take a few more days, but basically this is kind of an omen that Mars things are becoming visible. And this is interesting because, you know, Mars is about to enter the sign of Capricorn and become exalted. We had earlier in the autumn of 2023, we had that Mars-Sun cazimi, right? We had the reset of Mars in Mars's synodic cycle. So Mars is reborn earlier in or late into 2023, and then goes through that invisibility process of the cazimi during the reset. But this is the time at the very end of the year where Mars becomes visible and is about to enter exaltation. So one, like if you were to cast a solar return chart for 2024, one thing that you might see in that chart is that there is a prominence of Mars in 2024. So Mars things are going to be very, very important for the year ahead. That's one thing that I think is probably going to stand out almost more than anything else. And we will be taking a look at the year ahead here in some form or fashion by the end of December. We'll do a video on that about what maybe we could expect from 2024 as maybe the biggest transits or something like that. But definitely, if you were like thinking about this in terms of like a divination tool, such as like a solar return chart, but a solar return chart for the year ahead, Mars emerging into visibility, about to become exalted, is a definite and clear sign that says Mars will be a big part of the archetypal landscape of 2024. Mars things will be important. They will be in the news. We will have to be dealing with Marsy things in one way or another, both good and bad, right? So that is one thing that is really interesting. We see the emergence of Mars back into visibility right around this time at the beginning of 2024. So prior to Mars becoming exalted. So wow, that is a powerful last omen of the year, I think. Okay, well, that's what I have for the astrology of December. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Please let me know what you thought of this video and leave some comments in the comment section if you guys experience anything or want to reflect on anything that happens this month. I'd love to see the comments. We'll be back again with another Mantic Monday episode as we get in deeper into the month of December here. I appreciate you guys watching. Happy December, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.